Hey friends, we have some news from our sponsor Text Control. They just released version 32 of their document processing library, which includes new core functionality such as document footnotes, SVG export, and more. You can integrate document editing, signing, collaboration, and PDF processing into your ASP.NET Core and Angular applications with Text Control. These powerful libraries will let your developer teams focus on their core competencies, while Text Control handles your digital document processing. Check out all the new features and see the technologies live in action by visiting the demo at demos.textcontrol.com. That's demos.textcontrol.com. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselm, and this is another episode of Hanselm Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Alfredo Deza. He is a Python data scientist and an adjunct professor at Duke University. How are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me here, Scott. Really excited.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. I think that you and I have similar backgrounds, more than I realized, even though we are in different spaces and different technologies, and we grew up in different places. You grew up in Peru, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I was born in Peru and lived there until I was 25.
And, I like to look at people's LinkedIns and learn about them. You have Olympian in your LinkedIn, which is a bit of a flex.
Yeah, it's a long story, but my dad went to Olympic Games. He went to Mexico 68. And my family was very sports oriented. So I was always surrounded by sports activities and things. My dad was involved for the longest time with the International Olympic Committee and the Peruvian Olympic Committee. And when I was 11, I told him that I really want to do that seriously, and I wanted to take things very, very seriously and be the best there is. And it took me a while, but it took me 14 years, but finally made it. Yeah.
You're kind of what's called burying the lead there, right? You were in Athens in 2004, right? And you did the high jump, and you medaled?
No, I did, actually one of the worst performances ever.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was absolutely crushing. It was pretty terrible for me. The thing is that most folks tend to think about like, but you were there. And it must have felt amazing. It's like, no, it actually felt terrible because, I did a horrible performance and I felt like a failure. I felt like I failed my family, my friends, my country. It took quite a huge amount of effort to get there. And, track is measured against your 100% best ever performance. And that doesn't happen all the time. You try to time it. Sometimes it doesn't happen. That's why world records are better than records at the Olympic Games, for example. Like you can't time it perfectly. And my timing was off and I didn't do well. And it was pretty terrible. Although I was like, if you look at my placing, I think it was like 15 or 14, something like that. So you could argue, it's like, well, but 15 is like great. It's like, no, not really. It was pretty horrible.
But you could say that if someone was second too, right? You can take that to a toxic level.
You could. And it's not good. But also, high performance athletes and athletes that compete at that level, if you're not winning, if you're not being your absolute best, not good. So you have to try harder. You're brainwashed essentially into performing at a high level because it doesn't matter if you're tired, doesn't matter if it's cold outside, if it's raining, if it's your birthday.
I was thinking jet lag. I'm always wondering,
yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it just doesn't matter. You have to adapt. Like I've worked out at LAX, the LA airport, like once I had a very long trip to Australia, from Peru to Australia. So we had to go all the way to LA and then from LA to Sydney. And I was warming up. Like I changed clothes in the bathroom, warmed up outside, and then did the stairs up and down like a few times. And then washed up as best as possible and then continue on my trip. Like you can't miss a day. What are you going to do? And there, you're on a diet as well. So things are very sticky on the style of living that you're pursuing.
So no McDonald's at the airport when you're an Olympian?
No. Yeah, it was very strict, especially for high jumpers. It's very strict.
So you did not succeed in the Olympics and you had to come home after that and figure out where to put that. But then when did you go to college? And then how did that go? And what was the timeline? Because you did two things and didn't achieve what you wanted to achieve.
Yeah. So a few years before the Olympic Games, I became the first world champion in track for Peru. So that was a big deal. And it was a tremendous thing for Peru as a country. And it was amazing. I came back to Peru and suddenly became like very well known. I was on the front page of the newspapers all the time. And I gained the opportunity to be sponsored professionally. So there was a telecommunications company, a big one, international company in Peru, and they say, "Hey, we want to sponsor you. We believe in you." And at the time, I had around 20 plus full scholarships to come to the US. But NCAA rules say, hey, if you receive any dollar amount, you're considered a pro, and then you cannot compete for a NCAA institution as an athlete. You're considered a pro. So I had to say, well, take a decision and say, well, just take the sponsorship, stay back in Peru, found a university that would take me, and tried for a few months and felt like completely out of place. And I couldn't find alignment in my interest in what the classes that I was taking. So I dropped out after a few months, but I continued with my sponsorship all the way until the Olympic Games. At the Olympic Games, they dropped me. They say, yeah, you know what? That's it. They sent a notarized letter to my parents' house in Peru. And so it was a double whammy moment for me. Not only didn't place and did horrible to my expectations, but also my sponsor dropped me. So a year later, after the Olympic Games, I got married, and which was also kind of tricky because, as you can imagine, I was getting married with no income, no college degree. I had never worked in my life other than being a professional athlete. And then, got married and then decided, Peru is no longer a good spot for me and I need to make some drastic changes. So decided to come to the US, which was very difficult.
I'm curious, when you had all those scholarships, like because my son currently is trying to go to school and is doing his college applications. If you've got 20 opportunities to come to the U.S. for school, why take a sponsorship when you've got college in the U.S.? Was that daunting to go to college in the U.S. to think about that?
No, and I actually visited a couple. I went to, I think it was Iowa State, visited the college. I thought it was great, but the potential of a professional sponsorship and getting paid to do sports sounds great. And probably I can find a college in Peru that might have something interesting to me at the same time. So I thought I could juggle both rather than just one in the US.
Do these feel like speed bumps? Do you look back, 20 years later and think failure? Do you think learning opportunity? Where do you put those things in your brain? Because I don't like the word failure, but an expectation was set and an expectation was not met. Where do you put that in your brain?
It's interesting how the way of thinking changes as you grow older. I see things mostly these days as learning opportunities. And when things don't go your way and when things change and when things are not exactly right or abrupt changes happen in your life, then it's like we're learning something and something's new. And I think that the opportunity that I got to do what I did back in Peru was great. And then it allowed me to have a certain type of mentality that allowed me for some success here in the US, starting from scratch, because I was essentially self-taught on programming and I really liked technology. But I didn't have any money. So I would have to go to local bookstores this is kind of funny, but I would find like O'Reilly books really interesting. And O'Reilly is one of the top publishers of technology books here in the US. But I didn't have $50 to spend on that. So that's why I would go to the bookstore, not to the library, and sit and read and try to learn as much as possible. So there's definitely a learning thing that I could apply there of like consistency and commitment. I wanted to learn and become better and essentially try to succeed in life now that I was no longer a professional athlete. And I was able to start a programming career, a career in technology.
You said it was really hard to get to the U.S. because I assume that if you're going to work right now, you work at Microsoft. You've worked at a number of well-known technology companies, including Red Hat. I assume that trying to get a job without a degree is doubly challenging. plus you're coming from overseas. There's a lot to unpack there to figure out how to make your way over here when you don't have an Olympic medal or a professional sponsor to lean on.
Yeah. Funny enough, though, the only one time that I've been asked, like, here's your resume, where's the college degree? I don't see it here. That one time was when I got a temp job, like a part-time job at a company that required me to do some monitoring for these Linux servers. Apparently, I got to be a specialist in Linux. And after reading all of these books, and I wanted to be full-time. And I went to talk to the head of HR, and this person said, listen, you don't have a degree here. So my recommendation, you have to go back and get that college degree. And let's just talk about when you graduate to get you a full-time position. And I was devastated. And then I went to talk to the CTO of the company. And I said, listen, I'm devastated. This thing happened. And he said, well, that's hilarious. The head of HR, this person has a degree on education. It has nothing to do with HR. So the fact that they're telling you to get a degree is kind of hilarious. It's going to be more difficult for you to get started. But I see that if you're committed and you want to learn and you want to improve, then it's not going to be a problem at the end of the day. And that was the only one time that someone asked me. I have never been asked in my professional career what university I graduated from or where is it in my resume. And I've done the same, by the way. When I'm interviewing candidates for software engineering, and most everything really, I'm interested in the person that I'm talking to. This person is going to be probably my coworker, my teammate. Is this person motivated? That to me, that's one of the most important things. Is this person committed, motivated, wants to do the work? Imagine working with someone that is super knowledgeable, tons of experience, and the attitude is not there. It's kind of flaky. Who wants to work with someone like that?
Do you think that that's a privileged position to be in? I feel like I hear stories of people, mostly from social media, where they're being blocked at every turn because they don't have a degree. But then at the same time, we see boot camp folks that can, solve the problem or point to an open source project that they worked on, and that's enough evidence. Is it really just a company by company basis? Because some companies, including Microsoft, have just as a default at the bottom, bachelor's of science or equivalent. And it's that quote or equivalent part that's so unclear.
Yeah, there's a few things here. There are companies where they can pretty much make you feel miserable, especially for software engineering positions where they try to send you questions that are not even related to the position you're going to get hired. And I've certainly had my good share of those. And it's been tremendously hard to go through those. And, I've been asked to essentially explain how linked lists work. And I'm I've never used them. When at the time, 10-year career, I've never used linked lists in the stuff that I do. If it comes up, I'll do my research. If you really want me to, do you use linked lists? And it's no, we don't use them here, but I'm required to ask you these questions. So it becomes a little bit of a problem where a little bit of the industry has this preconceived notion that they can actually assess a software engineer by asking these, I call them silly questions that aren't related to the type of work that you are going to end up doing. However, there are companies that don't do this, and you can find them, and then you can interview for them. And my best interviews have been companies that ask me, yeah, sure, technical questions, or they tell me hey, how would you solve this problem? And walk me through this piece of code that you've written. And I've done the same. I've hey, let's talk about code that you've written in the past. Show me one of your repositories. Walk me through what was your decision making here. Explain to me why you took this path instead of this other path. And I think that's more accurate, but it's tricky. It's tricky to find, but it's also very easy. You know what's very easy to come up with reasons why you're probably not getting jobs. It's hard. It is a hard thing. I have a thing that I tend to say, which is no marathoner ends up a marathon and say, yeah, that was a piece of cake. Yeah, I didn't even get tired. You're going to go through a marathon, it's going to get you tired. And even the top in the world are going to finish the marathon. And you ask them, how do you feel? It's I'm pretty tired. Good race, but tired. That's it.
Hey friends, working remotely is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. And as businesses have rapidly transitioned to hybrid or purely remote work, the need for secure, compliant, and hassle-free remote access is paramount. So, What's the simplest, fastest, and secure way to connect to remote Windows computers and apps? That is TrueGrid. It's designed to simplify and modernize Microsoft Remote Desktop services without the fuss. No more exposed firewall ports or VPN. It's a zero-trust remote desktop solution with integrated multi-factor auth. You've got cybersecurity and an insurance-compliant environment. It streamlines your entire remote desktop access, makes you invisible to potential online threats. Everyone authenticates in the cloud before even getting a sniff of your network. And the real game changer, TrueGrid's secure RDP can deliver remote app to any device with just a button press and no latency. If you value your time, your security, and your sanity, TrueGrid is a no-brainer. So if you're ready to transform your remote access setup, get a demo of TrueGrid today at demotg.com. That's demotg.com, and you'll get an exclusive 20% discount on your first purchase. That's TrueGrid. So you teach, though, as an adjunct professor at Duke University. You teach I think, is it a Python boot camp on like pre-config, like basically like you're getting kids up to speed. So it's like a freshman class at Duke.
Yes.
But you don't have a degree. That must be challenging to be a professor without a degree at a school that you've never been to. And you're encouraging the people there to get a degree by virtue of the fact that you're teaching at a university.
Well, yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I love teaching. You know, I volunteer as a coach, a soccer coach. I used to do a little bit of soccer. I was in the Peruvian national team for a little bit as a goalkeeper. And I really like teaching and coaching. Coaching is kind of like a little bit trickier, unless it's for really beginners. Like I tend to be expect too much from people doing sports. But on the teaching side of things, and at Duke, I really, really love teaching. And one of the things that do happen in this, actually, the classes that I'm teaching are for graduate programs, including the Python Bootcamp. This is for folks that come from different disciplines to try to get into a master's program about actually AI. The program is called AI for Product Innovation. And I gave a guest lecture in one of these classes. This very nice professor, which I consider him my friend, Professor John Reifschneider, who leads one of these programs. I gave this guest lecture at his class, and he said, "Well, listen, we have a Python bootcamp thing. It's just 5 weeks. It prepares the students to go through the program. Wouldn't you want to teach that?" And I said, "Yeah, but why are you asking me?" Like, I don't get it. And he said something that resonated with me, which was, "Well, it seems that you really like teaching, which is pretty important if you want to teach. And the other one is that when you were giving your guest lecture, it seems like students were really happy to hear what you had to say." So to me, I see it as a way of helping out and feeling valuable. Sure, these students are there. They would learn the Python Bootcamp in some other way if I wasn't around. But I get a fulfillment from this activity that I wouldn't get otherwise. My hope be a positive image and a positive example for these students as they're trying to go through their studies and trying to learn something that can be as daunting as a programming language. Some of them are very experienced and some of them are not really experienced, and some of them struggle a lot, and I still try to help them all.
So you don't feel like hypocrisy isn't the word, but sometimes I would feel like a hypocrite. College is not for me, but it's for you, class, and let's all start our college class.
I have 3 kids, and I tell them I lead by example. And I think that behaving correctly, being truthful, being transparent, being honest, showing up for the work that needs to be done, I think it's how I do things. The hypocrisy on certain aspects of life, I think I would say, sometimes inevitable. I work with bosses that were horrendous to me, and I would say, "Hey, yeah, good morning. Thank you so much. Yeah, happy to be here." But at the same time, I was looking for another job because that wasn't going well. So sure, there's a level of hypocrisy in everything. I tend to really like teaching, and for me, Duke presents to me a fantastic opportunity for that. For me, university, I couldn't see it work for me. It sometimes is necessary or useful for others, and it's not up to me to make that choice. Plus, a lot of these students are already there, and I think I can make a difference. I'll tell you one thing: Python packaging, horrible, not very good. I don't tell them like, hey, listen, this is how you do Python packaging. And this is the correct way. And it's going to be great. I tell them like, this sucks. This is horrible. You're not going to like it. But unfortunately, since the inception of Python, this is how it's been. And it's probably not going to change. And I tell it how it is, and I think I really like having that opportunity and I believe making it a little bit better for these students.
When you were hyper focused on being a world-class athlete, were you also playing with computers? Like, were you good at two things at once? Sometimes I feel like people win the genetic lottery and they're good at two things.
I was interested in technology, but not had a computer. I tried to install Linux on my computer for the longest time. I think while I was at the Olympic Games, I was already toying around with Linux, but I wouldn't say I was very good at other stuff that wasn't track or the high jump. But I like to think that I've become more interested in other things now that I have more time to do so. Like I really like, before joining the podcast, we were talking about painting. I really like painting and art. I really like taking pictures. I'm a woodworker. I build my furniture.
So you are good at everything.
Well, no, not everything. But like there's other stuff that appeared later in my life that I was like, well, I didn't know that I could do furniture. I was like, let's just try that out. And then I was like, well, I really like languages. So I started learning Italian and Portuguese, which I visited Portugal a while ago. And I have friends from Brazil, try to speak Portuguese all the time. I think you and I, we've talked in Spanish a little bit. I think it's amazing and it's very motivating. But as with anything in life, if you're happy doing it and interested in doing it, it's like a positive circle of goodness where you like it, you learn a little bit more, you do it a little bit more, then you become better at it. And then that circle, keeps going on. It's a snowball of positive things that can happen in your life. And I think that's the trick. I'm not the best woodworker. You can spot my furniture and be like, oh, this kind of... Why is this tilted? Well, thanks for noticing, Scott. But but I just like it. Probably like the next table will not be that tilted.
It seems like discipline is a thing. Like if you make it to the Olympics, you are a person with discipline. And I saw this thing recently online that someone said, discipline is the gift that you give your future self. And like making that decision, I'm going to work on this thing. I'm going to work hard on it. And I don't know if it's going to turn out to be a nice piece of furniture or if it's going to turn out to be a trip to the Olympics or if it'll turn out to be a degree, but I'm going to invest in myself. If you were doing that as a child and you saw that in your dad at 11, then you applied the same level of discipline and focus in your work in Python and in data science and in AI and ML.
I think there's no other way. I saw this formula for success, which it equals to experience plus knowledge. Meaning that experience adds and knowledge adds, but there's a multiplier to these two things, and that's attitude. And I think with the right attitude, if you don't have too much experience and too much knowledge, but you want to learn, you're committed and you want to show up every day and be consistent about the effort that you want to make to get at the next level, you're going to get there. And the experience and the knowledge will come with it. I think there's a natural fear on feeling really bad at doing something because you don't have the experience. I've never been good with instruments. Actually, my dad used to make fun of me saying like, you're not very good at music. He's a natural percussionist. And he would make fun of me because I could not. For the life of me, I could not. And there's a Peruvian percussion instrument called cajon, which translates to a wooden box. It's the Afro-Peruvian community, made this a thing in Peru. And for the longest time, I wanted to play it and I couldn't. But I was like, you know what? I really want to learn and, watch some YouTube videos, build myself my own musical instrument and started learning the rhythms and playing it. Do you know how bad I played that thing in the first go? Horrible. But, you practice, you like it, you practice a little bit more, and then you become a little bit better. And then that's it. I think that's the secret. And it's always going to work if you really want to do it. If you don't want to do it, I mean, if you don't like running and it's like, Scott, let's go for a run, you're not going to have a good time. And you're probably not going to want to do it again. I think there's a lot of that.
But it is also doing the things you don't want to do. I'm trying to teach my kids, like, there's a difference between I don't like it versus I don't want to do it. But sometimes you have to do those things. You have to invest in yourself doing things you don't like in order to succeed. And that's the really challenge. That's where discipline is, right? You probably like the high jump and you liked track and you liked soccer, but you didn't like daily doubles.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, not everything's a bed of roses. And similar to my phrase of like marathoners ending the marathon and feeling tired, there's no other way around it. Even if you're naturally inclined or naturally good at something, you're not going to get to the next level if you are not putting the effort. And sometimes the effort is going to suck. I've written a few books on technology. And I can tell you, like, there were days that I was like, I'm feeling miserable and I don't want to write another paragraph. I hope like this, I end this book and I actually don't want to write any other books again. But every day I would wake up 6:30 in the morning, come here to my office and write for 2 hours solid. Every day, every single day. It doesn't matter if I'm tired, like last night I ate too much, I don't feel great. Like, it doesn't matter. Blank page, I have to do it. I have to finish it. There's no other way around it. And by the end, 6 months or a year goes by and then you have a book in your hands. That's great. But yes, 100%. The things are not going to come for free to you. Like, you have to put the effort. You have to push through. And at the end, it's very rewarding.
So you have put up the Python Bootcamp up on GitHub. So you can go to github.com/practical-bootcamp. And it's a complete template. You've actually got multiple weeks where folks can go week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. You've got the assignments up there, even a complete deployment template, and you're keeping this up to date for this Python Bootcamp. Can other colleges, universities, high schools take this and run with it?
100%. So one of the great things about the program with Duke is that all of this content is out there in the open, and like any student, actually students have follow that on their own at their own pace, and they've gone through the exercises and set up their own thing, and they push through, and everything's in there. So I really believe in democratizing knowledge, and the more I can do that and the more empowered I am to do that, the better. Sure, like some content might be behind a paid service or something like that, but that's okay. Not everything's going to be free. But whenever I can, being able to share that knowledge, I think is great. And it is one of the things why I tend to like Microsoft Learn. It usually people think like, well, that's for Microsoft documentation of internal tools. And it's like, no, you can learn Python. And there's modules there for learning Python, Rust, other programming languages. I really like Rust, for example. And I think it's great. And how much it costs? It's like, no, nothing. It's free and you can go and learn and do some exercises. It's great. So thank you for pointing that out. Very, very important for me to be able to help others by democratizing knowledge.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Scott, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate the time, and hope we can keep chatting and keep talking about other stuff as well.
Absolutely. We have been chatting with Alfredo Deza. He is an Olympian. He is a Pythonista. He is a data scientist, and he's a generally nice fella who has put some great content out there for you to check out. And you can look at that at github.com/practical-bootcamp. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.